Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of GeoPod. I'm your host, Dylan Woods, and obviously the main topic of the day is going to be the joint US-Israeli campaign targeting the Ayatollah regime of Iran. Now, obviously, this is a rapidly evolving situation, a lot of moving parts, a lot of updates coming out pretty much every hour. So by the time I'm posting this, probably some of the things I said will have already been outdated or other events will have transpired. Should anything transpire that is that I deem in any way, shape or form noteworthy to talk about, then I will most certainly do that on this channel with additional episodes. I will already have to say that somewhere later this week there will be a strategy breakdown pertaining to pretty much rebuilding Iran after the fall of the Ayatollah regime. So I'm not necessarily going into too much about it right now. What I will discuss is some of the attacks, their strategic objectives, the way they were waged, their effects, the ramifications, obviously Iranian counteroffensives that have taken place, and what more to expect in the coming days. So just straight from the get-go, we can conclude that everything I've said in my latest strategy breakdown pertaining to how a US joint Israeli operation would look like pretty much has come to pass. Pretty much exactly as I predicted, which wasn't that surprising to me, honestly, because neutralizing the Ayatollah regime, like I said on the previous episodes, is in no way, shape or form a complicated task. Iran has no answer to Israeli and United States air superiority. The main weapon of choice, I guess, are their missiles, which they've tried to utilize a lot in their counteroffensives, but have been degraded, or rather the numbers in which they were able to launch them have been degraded by the persistent Israeli and United States aerial campaigns, backed up by dense air defense umbrellas around US and Israeli assets, as well as other Gulf states in the region. So the US joint Israeli, the first strikes of the US Israeli campaign struck around 900 targets, most of them pertaining to missile launch sites, air defense sites, and key figures within the Ayatollah's chain of command. So right previously on my channel, I kind of laid out multiple scenarios. One was a more steady approach where the United States and Israel would seek to first degrade Iran's retaliatory capacity and air defense capacity before going after the Ayatollahs, and another was obviously with the resources at their disposal that they could do all of that simultaneously, that they would try to fulfill all the strategic and operational objectives simultaneously, and that is exactly what has occurred, right? Israel itself has deployed more than 200 or around 200 fighter aircraft in this operation, marking it as the largest air campaign ever waged by Israel in its history. So that's obviously saying something. Obviously their efforts were backed up by 2 United States carrier strike group, each mounting dozens and dozens of fighter jets, backed up by a host of naval vessels, electrical jamming, equipment and systems and platforms. So obviously this is a huge, devastatingly effective operation, and it shows. Right from the get-go, Iran wasn't able to launch as many volleys as they did in last year's war with Israel, mainly because the bulk of their launch sites in the western and southwestern provinces of Iran, exactly at the same locations I have outlined previously, right? For all these news outlets, it said that there were all these secretive bases, blah, 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 blah. No, they were not secretive. They've been exposed by Israeli intelligence last year, and now the United States and Israel have followed up on that intelligence and on that blueprint. So Israel and the United States were able to effectively degrade the vast majority of these launch sites within western and southwestern Iran. There seems to have been a diversion in strategic objectives, right? The United States seemed to be focused mostly on the air defense umbrellas and missile launch sites, as well as a naval headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, whereas Israel was primarily occupied with striking key figures within the Iranian chain of command. I have to pause it a little bit, guys, sorry, because there's a tractor coming. There's not too much noise, honestly. So yeah. Just a quick side note. Unfortunately, I'm still not in a place where I have a definitive office, somewhere that I will be staying for the foreseeable future. Although some moves are being made in that regard, so please be patient with me. So up until then, you might hear the occasional tractor coming, or because we're living quite remotely as of right now. Anyway, back to the topics at hand. So Israel seems to be primarily focused on eliminating key figures within the Iranian chain of command. They seem to have been responsible for the death of Ayatollah Khomeini, which has now been confirmed by various Western as well as Iranian sources. So obviously that stands as a huge blow to the Ayatollah regime. Like I said, in no way, shape or form surprising to me, right? The United States and Israel are going after the head of the snake, quite literally. This is an operation that they will have to see through to the very end, and that can only be concluded in one way, and that is the fall of the Ayatollah regime, right? So, speaking of Iran and the Ayatollahs, let's talk a little bit about their counteroffensives. Like, what have we seen from them in these last 2 days? Well, nothing surprising, really. However, what I will say this, what has been surprising is that they went after the US partners in the Gulf states like immediately, targeting not just US military infrastructure, but civilian targets as well. So what that tells me is that Iran is desperate. They want to draw in as many parties in the region into this war. They want to escalate it to the fullest extent possible, in the hopes that it will besmirch and discredit the actions and the campaign of Israel and the United States are currently waging against them. However, that will probably result in very limited success, right? If anything, it aggrieved the Gulf states, further bolstering their support for the ongoing United States-Israeli campaign. Once again, they fail to strike any meaningful military infrastructure. The United States is in no way hindered, despite their naval headquarters in Bahrain being struck, is in no way hindered in their ongoing and persistent efforts against Iran. So once again, Iran is great at projecting through these large volleys and barrages of missiles. Yet once again, just like in last year's war against Israel, they fail to strike any meaningful military political infrastructure, making them pretty much useless, right? They have been targeting Israel for many hours on end last night with volleys after volleys of missiles and drones, most of which, of course, have been intercepted. However, one struck a residential area in Tel Aviv. But given the scope and given the amount of projectiles that have been fired at Israel, their interception rate is still incredibly high. And once again, like I've said before, no military and political infrastructure was struck. So their operations can continue unhindered. Like I said, Iran will be strongest in the first day of the campaign, and that was yesterday. So whatever Iran is going to do now, and there's been talk about this next generation weaponry that they're going to employ, listen, if you have next generation weaponry at your disposal, you use it from the get-go. You don't wait until all your launch sites are degraded, until your entire chain of command is disrupted, until all your electrical warfare capabilities are nullified. No, you don't wait to apply or execute or fire your strongest systems and strongest ammunitions from a position that you're completely degraded. No, you do that straight from the get-go. So that's all rhetoric, it's all projection, and that's something that the Ayatollah regime has done ever since its inception, right? Influence through intimidation, through posturing, and through projection, albeit not necessarily rooted in reality or realistic capability, that is. So that has been some of the counteroffensives. Now, obviously, the most significant countermeasure that the Iranians have took was closing off the Strait of Hormuz. And that's something that I do want to delve in a little bit deeper, right? Because when you look online, that's what most people seem to be concerned about. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, because that's obviously where a significant amount of global trade and oil revenue is being passed through. So yeah, that is most certainly a critical lane, a critical shipping route, and it will undoubtedly come with certain ramifications and consequences. However, it is not necessarily a military or tactical or strategic obstacle for the United States and Israel at this particular moment in time, right? Iran can only enforce or continuously enforce a naval blockade if they are at the capacity to do so. So the best countermeasure that the United States and Israel can apply in this particular moment this time is just keep hammering their navy, keep hammering their headquarters, keep hammering their ports, keep hammering their command and control structures until they are no longer able to enforce the naval blockade or have to reposition their vessels and infrastructure elsewhere. So that's the best way to counter that. It makes no sense to attribute military resources to the Strait of Hormuz, where you can give the Ayatollah regime and its lackeys the crippling blow on the ground and on shore, which is exactly what the United States and Israel are doing at this particular moment in time. So yes, Strait of Hormuz is critical, but it is in no way, shape or form a problem that needs to be dealt with today. It can be dealt with tomorrow once the Ayatollah regime is more significantly degraded, making it significantly easier to clear up that naval blockade, which might even disintegrate, like I said, by itself, because the Iranians can no longer uphold it with the resources and the command and control structures and frameworks they have at their disposal. So there's another thing that kind of bothered me a little bit, although I'm not sure that bothered is the right word, because it's kind of to be expected. When you see the analysis and comments online, mostly by people, by the way, who have zero professional expertise pertaining to anything related to geopolitics, let alone specifically this conflict or the background of this conflict, right? We're talking about international law, right? It was an unlawful strike on Iran, and there was no imminent danger. And there was, why do certain laws apply to one party and not to the next? Blah 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 blah. Well, my main answer to that is context. And if context, that's always what I say. And then when they reply that, well, I can't see the context, that's when I reply, yeah, I know you can't see the context. That's the real issue, because you don't have the knowledge and or expertise or experience to see the context, meaning it's best perhaps if you not talk about geopolitics in general on a professional platform. But that's just me. So let me debunk that relatively quick. Ever since its inception, or rather the inception of the Ayatollah regime after the Islamic Revolution of 1979, the Islamic regime has been geared towards two main objectives: the destruction of Israel and the overthrow of the Western world. And that has been their greatest strategic objectives ever since they came into power. Every effort, every attack that Israel's enemies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, have waged against Israel or against United States or other Western assets within the region came by the hand, directly or indirectly, of the Ayatollah regime. They have had a hand in every catastrophe within the region and the spread of not just regional but global terrorism and global radicalization for decades on end. They helped plan the 7 October attacks on Israel. They helped arm Hezbollah to launch massive volleys of rockets and missiles on Israeli territory. They have spread a radical ideology throughout the entire Middle East and beyond. They've sought to infiltrate Western campuses with the aim to spread their radical ideology and undermine Western Union and resolve in the face of radical expansionism. Every effort pertaining to each and every one of these events, Iran stood at the helm of, was not just a player in, but the orchestrator of. And that is something to consider. If a country, time after time, year after year, says that their sole intent, their sole strategic purpose globally is to very annihilation and destruction, then build a vast ballistic missile program which helps them acquire thousands and thousands of intermediate range ballistic missiles, backed up by an ever-expanding nuclear program that has been persistently hidden and obscured from international watchdogs. How much more information than that you need to know that there's an imminent threat? And these missiles have been launched towards Israel. Unprovokedly, Hezbollah, 8 October 2023, a day after the brutal Hamas attacks on Israel, start launching volleys of missiles they acquired through Iran, with operators that have been trained by the Ayatollah regime, by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Force. So yes, Iran has had a hand in every catastrophe, and Iran poses an imminent threat to any party within the region, but in particularly Israel and the United States of America. So if that country starts rebuilding its ballistic missile stockpile with the sole aim of annihilating you, wiping you off the face of the planet, then yes, that constitutes an imminent threat. And that's pretty much all I want to say about that. So please don't get swept away in these narratives, which often emanate from people that have zero expertise and knowledge pertaining to this particular subject. They've done zero investigative work. They've done zero research, zero study. And especially in times like these where events are rapidly evolving and developments occur pretty much every hour, it's very important to rethink the legitimacy of our sources. And that's just a little piece of advice that I want to give you all. So what can we expect for the coming days? Well, the Israeli-United States campaign is going to continue. More and more figures within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard chain of command will fall, as well as others within the Ayatollah's immediate circle. They will probably go after his son. They will probably go after the Prime Minister Brzezinski, because these two figures will be most likely next in line to fulfill any high-ranking positions or take over the leadership of the country, at the very least for the time being. We'll probably see a further degradation of Iran's ability to launch retaliatory strikes, which will make them to a certain degree less predictable. Rather than striking United States and Israeli military assets directly, they will probably continue striking other Gulf states in the region as well, just to create that certain shock, and in the hopes of drawing them into a wider conflict, hopefully trying to get some sort of favor from the international community as a whole, hopefully hoping that public pressure will be mounting and therefore will help in swaying Israel and the United States in order to continue or to stop their ongoing campaign, which will have zero effect and zero result, by the way. This campaign that the Israelis and the United States are currently waging has been prepared for many months, and it is not a campaign that will be halted lightly, especially not for as long as the strategic and operational objectives of both parties have not been achieved. So that's pretty much what you can expect for the coming days. People also ask, well, will other parties get actively involved? The Gulf states, for example. As of this moment in time, I believe that chance to be quite small, given the fact that the United States and Israel are incredibly effective in their current endeavors. So there really is no need for the Gulf states to get involved. They can just pretty much sit back and watch the show and watch the Ayatollah regime cripple both from the outside as well as the inside. What we will also most likely see, by the way, is a growing protest on the streets of Iran, a more emboldened populace, which hopefully will organize themselves and or align in some way, shape or form with other opposition factions, creating a clear opposition bloc that hopefully at a certain point in time can act as a substitute to the Ayatollah regime. But this is all a topic that I will discuss in another strategy breakdown, which will come later this week. There I will truly delve into the options and scenarios at the table and how Iran can rebuild itself into a prosperous nation that can be a valuable partner for peace, stability, not just within the region, but throughout the entire globe. So as of right now, this is all I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this clip. And if you have any questions or comments for me, as always, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. And I aim to get back at you as swiftly as possible. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.